Living in communities, we get to share the beautiful celebrations that happen around us. But how do we respond in community to the tougher life events like aging and dying?
I didn't fully understand the power of death and burial in community before I buried my infant son in the green burial ground in Findhorn. He died during labor after a completely healthy pregnancy and unproblematic birth until his heart stopped and he died. And I knew immediately, already while I was still in hospital, what kind of funeral I wanted to have. I wanted to bury him at home in community where I could bring him home, like bring him into the relations where I live every day. I wanted to bury him in the land that I love, where I know I can hear the birds and the sea, where my friends and I walk past, where we have barbecues, where we also do celebrations. I knew I wanted my friends Durton and Craig to hold the ceremony in a way that is true to my heart and to the ethos and heart of my community. I knew I wanted everybody there, like the whole community. I wanted to be witnessed, and I wanted to share also a celebration of Louis, my son, and his brief existence on this planet. And I wanted it full of flowers, completely full of flowers. It was in May, so it was easy. And thanks to the Green Burial Ground, I got to have all this, and I got to create a memory of ceremony that really supported me in my grief. I got to have something that, despite being steeped in, heart-wrenching grief and really soul-searing pain, also sits within me with the sense of love and beauty, togetherness and connection.
The seed for the Findhorn Ecovillage and community in the north of Scotland was planted when its 3 founders, newly out of their jobs, were forced to move to a bare caravan park. They weren't intending to start a community, but slowly one grew around them. They began a garden to grow food, and thanks to their connection with spirit and their co-creation with nature energies, the plants thrived miraculously and drew more people to join them. That was in 1962, and almost 60 years later, the Findhorn Foundation and community has blossomed. It was a founder member of GEN and is proud to have GEN International's headquarters here. The community is still centred at the park, now an area of incredible natural beauty, bordered by the sea, dunes, and a large nature area known as the hinterland, which is set aside for conservation, and it has the community's green burial ground.
When I came to the community in the late 80s, there hadn't been many deaths directly in the community, nor many funerals in our particular way, because it was a working community and people would take that issue out with. That changed in the 1990s. And there were a certain number of learnings that we did that brought us here to this burial ground. The first one was that one of our beloved elders, Eileen's best friend, was in her last stages of life and ready to die, and Eileen wanted to look after her at home. We managed that, and when that was complete in a beautiful way, the body was handed over to the undertaker for cremation. The following year, another elder died at night, but her next of kin didn't want to hand the body over, and so we learned how to look after a body, how to be undertakers, and how to take the coffin to the crematorium. The next big learning was when a young woman with an 11-year-old son died of leukemia at home in a very conscious way, supported by volunteers. She wanted her own coffin decorated at home, so we ordered a cardboard coffin. Her son and others decorated the coffin at home, and she was transported from her home in the Findhorn village directly to the burial ground. The next big learning was how to celebrate a big life. It was the death of an Irishman who was very central to the community, and he had a 6-year-old son. He died of a massive heart attack at night. That funeral was really the first big funeral in the Universal Hall, with all ages represented and the death integrated in our daily life. The next big learning came when Lyle, one of the builders of the Universal Hall, died, and died very consciously. He knew that he was in the terminal phase of a cancer, but he was relatively well, and a few weeks before his death, he actually dug his own grave with his men's group. However, we were told then by the local council that that was the last private burial we would be allowed to do here. That was in 2002, and by 2006 we had everything in place to make this a public green burial site.
The green burial is a major source of income for the Findhorn Hinterland Trust and all the environmental work that it does. And it started back when my mother died. There have been 3 burials before that on this land, and that's in Scotland. That is the legal number of burials that can happen. Then when she died, we realised that it needed to become more formal, that we needed to set up this as a green burial on the land here in the middle of these woods. To date we have 40 people buried in the ground here, about 40, and there are 50 layers, that is burial sites, that have been booked, if you like, for people in the future. How it works here on the site is that people book a layer. It's not a specific place, and then we need to mark when there is a body that is buried there. We need to mark that. We actually use an electronic marker, so there's nothing on the surface here, and some people can plant trees, so it will actually go back to a forest in the future. This will be a forested area. There's a whole variety of different coffins that people can be buried in. It can be cardboard, can be wicker basket woven together, can be old packing cases. What is important is that there's nothing left in the ground that cannot be decomposed in time. That is part of it being a green burial site here. This is a major celebration for people. We often have 50, 100, 150 people coming to these celebrations on this site. It's a real celebration of their lives.
As the Findhorn Foundation community approaches its 60th birthday, many lessons have been learned across a whole generation. As community members live and age where they are, many of them don't want to have to leave, and historically it may have been necessary, but today it's no longer necessary, and a person can choose to die at home. I provide a link between their need and the resource to enable them to achieve their wish.
This is an important community resource. It is important too in that it builds community. We celebrate on our land. People are here, they don't have to go elsewhere. They come out of their houses and they can be moved from there onto the land here.
And as people reach the end of their age, they don't lose their value. Living within community and being able to care for aging community members ensures that they are valued and honoured, and that younger people are able to see that there's nothing really to be afraid of, because living in community means that you belong no matter what.
Dying is an immensely personal issue, but it is also a collective one. There is a lot of healing to be had for the individual going through that end of life, that particular integrated part of life. But for those around it, if the process is inclusive, it can be a phenomenally healing experience.
I also realized after the burial that he is buried in community also in the sense of who he is there with. I know the people around. I know I can go and say hi to his neighbors. I've known them. I've spoken to them. They have meant something in my life, just like Louis means something in the life of those people who visit that cemetery, who walk around and who see the tree that we planted on his grave every day.
If you're wanting to do this in your own communities, there's a few things that you need to think about. One is the legalities in your part of the world. Actually burying people on property, you need to find that out. The second thing is watch out for what your soils are like, because if it's too wet you cannot bury bodies. And the other thing is that don't take it too lightly. We've taken on the responsibility of being the burial authority for this piece of ground. And that's a big responsibility because we actually have to look after the land 100 years after the last burial. Now that's quite a long time that we have to do this. It's important to realise that this is a sacrosanct space. This is very much a living area. Yes, we have some people buried here, but we also have weddings, we have birthdays, we have community celebrations happening here on this little piece of land. There's something that will go on, and it helps build community.